Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori and this is Africa 54. Well, tonight, the international wheels of diplomacy are spinning between Russia, Syria, and the United States. Syria has accepted a Russian plan to dismantle its chemical weapons under international control. U.S. President Barack Obama says the plan could be a breakthrough and possibly prevent American airstrikes on the Syrian regime. VOA's Klein reports.
Mr. Obama told the PBS NewsHour Monday that he has instructed Secretary of State John Kerry to discuss with Russia the proposal for Syria to surrender its chemical weapons.
If we can exhaust these diplomatic efforts and come up with a formula that gives the international community a verifiable, enforceable mechanism to deal with these chemical weapons in Syria, then I'm all for it. But we're going to have to see specifics.
The president also told ABC World News that Syria could prevent U.S. airstrikes by turning over its chemical weapons.
Absolutely, if in fact that happened. And so, I consider this a modestly positive development.
Syria's government Monday welcomed Russia's initiative. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton met with Mr. Obama at the White House Monday and conditionally backed Russia's proposal.
That would be an important step. But this cannot be another excuse for delay or obstruction. And Russia has to support the international community's efforts sincerely or be held to account.
Since announcing that he would seek authorization from Congress for U.S. strikes on Syria, Mr. Obama has been campaigning to gain support for those strikes, speaking with congressional leaders at the White House, with world leaders at last week's G20 summit in Russia, and Monday in interviews with U.S. television news programs. The president's efforts are building toward a rare televised evening address to the nation, likely his final appeal to the American people. Public opinion polls show that a majority of Americans oppose U.S. military action in Syria, and the proposal to launch strikes on Syria faces stiff opposition in Congress. Mr. Obama told the PBS NewsHour he understands the odds against getting Congress to approve his request.
I also want to make the case, though, that it is in our long-term national security interest to make sure that this chemical weapons ban is enforced.
Other members of the administration have also been making the case. National Security Advisor Susan Rice at Washington's New America Foundation said the military action the president wants would not mark the start of another war.
There will be no American boots on the ground, period. Nor would it resemble Kosovo or Libya, which were sustained air campaigns. This will not be an open-ended effort.
In the meantime, the administration says it continues to prepare for possible military action against Syria. Klein, VOA News, the White House.
Well, joining me now to talk more about the crisis in Syria is VOA State Department correspondent Scott Stearns. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Vincent.
So first, this proposal by Russia sounds very similar to something Secretary John Kerry had actually said in one of his press conferences, doesn't it?
It does. President Obama says this first came up at the G20 summit when President Putin mentioned this possible idea of the sequester of Syrian chemical weapons during the summit there in St. Petersburg. But it was not something that the Obama administration had discussed publicly until Secretary Kerry mentioned it in what appeared to be a sort of off-the-cuff comment at a press conference that he had in London. And before anyone could really get ahead of that, the Russians then said it was a great idea. The Syrian foreign minister was in Moscow at the time, and that momentum seems to have carried itself on to the point where you saw in that Klein spot, President Obama in his round of television interviews last night really had to get behind it and talk about this as a plausible idea. I imagine that the address that President Obama gives this evening in the United States will be different than the address that he was writing even 2 days ago because of this new idea.
So in other words, you can say it does actually change the narrative at this point.
It certainly does, especially after more than 2 years of fighting in the Syrian civil war and very little progress diplomatically. The inability of Secretary Kerry and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to agree even on who might be invited to a second round of talks in Geneva.
Now, what do you think the president might want to achieve in his evening address today?
This is an appeal directly to the American people in hopes of convincing Congress that they should authorize the use of force. I think this proposal on the sequestration of Syrian chemical weapons makes that a harder argument. Here at the State Department, people are pushing, saying that it's even more important to have this congressional authorization to strike Syria because the argument is made Bashar al-Assad would never have agreed to give up his chemical weapons without that appeal. But I think it will be a harder case to make, especially because it's an easy thing to vote against in a country fatigued by the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, thanks a lot, Scott, for your insights. Well, Scott Stearns reporting there live from the State Department. Now, as we continue our coverage of the crisis in Syria, VOA will broadcast a 30-minute special report as we carry U.S. President Barack Obama's speech to the nation beginning at 0100 UTC Wednesday. So be sure to tune in at 0100 UTC Wednesday.